We go forever and ever, yeah. You know that I'm much upset, yeah. You wish that you can do better, no, no, won't let her, We go forever and ever, yeah. I go and create the pressure, yeah. You wish that you can do better, You wish that you can do better, yeah, yeah. Ooh. We go forever and ever. We go forever and ever.
Welcome everyone to Coaching in Session. My name is Michael Rearden and I'll be your mindset coach today. And today we're going to be talking about how we can get out of that limited mindset, especially when something is going wrong in our life. Because many people, I think they get into this idea that, oh, someone said that I can't do something, so that limit is going to be our limit. And what we do here at Reverend Concepts is we fight all of those limits because there is no reason why we need to have those limits in our life. So if you are one of those people who have been told, whether from a person, even a medical doctor, you're going to want to watch this episode because we're going to be talking about so many different things that can bring about a newfound meaning in who you can become, what you can attain, and how you can heal. Because it's very important about the healing process. Because if you go to a hospital because of a sickness or an ailment, some doctor might say, oh, this is the reason there's no cure. Or this is the reason we're going to give you a Band-Aid and that's just going to be some pills. You have to take these amount of pills every single day. But life is not about taking a bunch of pills and barely making it through, or feeling like you're not happy, or feeling like it's making you wrong. You get to choose how you feel and you get to choose the results of your life, your circumstances. And though not every doctor or not every medical professional is going to be there to support you, some are. And we have to find those individuals so that they can support you. So today I'm going to be bringing on Dr. Kelly Olson, who is one of those individuals, who is going to see you not just because of your past, but look at your future. What can you accomplish? What can you attain? How can she help you? So let's get into that interview with Dr. Kelly and myself. Welcome, Dr. Kelly Olson, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm well, Michael. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for coming on and spending a little bit of time with me today. And today I have you on as an integrative life coach. And when we give that title of an integrative life coach, it could bring about so many different types of questions. I think many people, they misconstrue what a life coach is. And it's basically the blanket statement for what someone can really do. Because a lot of people know what a life coach is, but I know you do so much more. In your own words, can you tell the world what you do and how you help them?
Yes, I love that. So it's not quite right. So I'll sort of fill in the spots or fill in the missing links here. So my background, I have a PhD in molecular neuropharmacology. And so what that means is I went to school for forever. But what it means is I look at health and disease states from a very, very small chemical level, mostly in the brain. Obviously, that's where the neuro piece comes from. But what I've learned over the years is that that's all well and good, sort of at a myopic level. But if I were to help people, I needed to take that molecular side of disease and turn it into, what does that equate to behaviorally? How can I change my life to get healthier? So I started from that very myopic kind of molecular level, and I've now moved into more of an integrative approach. So I'm a doctor, but I do a lot of coaching. And what that means is I do a lot of, okay, let's look at your diet. Let's look at how active you are. If you've got some labs where you've had blood work, I want to see that too. I want to know what's going on with your body from a very rounded, holistic approach. Again, not discounting anything that's more traditional, pharmaceutical, etc. But I want to add to that, and I want to make this from a lifestyle perspective. So that's where that lifestyle coaching really comes in. But to your point, it's so much more than that.
Well, what got you on that path rather than just being a typical medical doctor?
Interesting enough, I wanted to be behind the scenes. And today I do a lot of keynote speaking, so the last thing I do is behind the scenes. But I love research, and so putting puzzle pieces together was something that I really enjoyed. And as I walked down the MD pathway, I realized I wouldn't get that time with my patients. And so as a researcher from the PhD side of things, I had that time. So I used that and to my advantage. And I thought, instead of going down the MD path, I can still do medicine, but I can have more time with my patients and clients. So that was really the impetus for that. I love puzzles. I love putting them together. I love figuring them out. And I wanted more time with my patients.
Okay, yeah, that's a very good point. When it comes to like a job, right? So for me, I do a lot of mindset work. There's always a story behind why we chose that profession. For me, I saw a lot of the limiting beliefs. I was a teacher before, taught music and special ed, and I love my job. I mean, to be honest, I could still be teaching today and I would still love every single moment. The issue was not that I wasn't doing something, but I could do so much more. I saw the limiting beliefs being created. I saw the kids being unprepared for the real world. So when they graduate high school and they go off to the real world, or if they go off to college, they are not equipped mentally, let alone physically, most likely, to handle all of the world that's going to be hitting them. Because typically when you're 18, you're in a different bracket. You're no longer a juvenile. Now you're going to be tried as an adult. And we have that mindset that, oh, we know everything because of our ego, because of our childhood development. We built our identity, and that is what we think who we are. And I find it very interesting that we can help people get into a better mindset sooner rather than later and try to mitigate some of that trial and error. Because if you can talk to yourself when you were 20 years old, I'm sure you would give yourself some great advice. You would say, okay, I know what you're thinking. Instead of doing that, you should do this. And you're going to be in such a better place. And that's what I do with a lot of people. And then sometimes, of course, they have already went through that trial and error, that trauma, and then it's that healing process. What was it like for you when you began your journey and choosing your field in your career?
Good question. So I think for me, the start of it was my own issues, my own digestive issues that I didn't understand, always uncomfortable, always had issues with digesting food right from when I was little. I mean, I had colic as a baby, chronic ear infections. And at the time, the digestive system and those symptoms really didn't have a connection. And so nobody really knew what was happening. And they figured, well, you just grow out of it. And then in addition to that, as I got into my adulthood, I had a friend of mine, her husband was diagnosed with, I think it was 5 different mental illnesses, and was put on a whole host of medications, and basically was then put into a hospital. And the doctor said, well, you know what, just make sure you get your affairs in order because this man isn't likely to leave the hospital. She's a nurse, and she said, you know what, I don't accept that. There's got to be something more. So she found a doctor who really looked at an integrative approach to medicine. So the traditional medicine, like the pharmaceuticals, etc., but also looked at lifestyle. And they started using supplements from a company in a little town in Wisconsin that were producing these supplements and also these tests to look at neurotransmitters, hormones, etc. And she brought her husband down to, and it was in Florida, down to this doctor. It was a hard road to get down there. He didn't want to go, all of these things, of course. Fast forward a couple years after seeing that doctor, he started to get better. He started to decrease the amount of medications he was on. All of these positive things were happening. Now, I'm not saying this happens to everybody at all, but this is definitely the sort of the start of my journey. So she was telling me about this as he was healing. And I thought, I got to find that company in Wisconsin and I want to work there. And I was just getting ready to graduate from my PhD. And I got in the car. I called down to the company. No jobs available. There's nothing. 2 weeks later, I called again. No jobs available. I thought, I'm getting in the car and I'm driving down to Wisconsin. 5.5 hour drive. I had no idea what I was going to say when I got there, but I saw the change in my friend's husband and he was getting well. And I got in the car. I drove down to Wisconsin. I walked into the little company and this wonderful lady greeted me at the door and she said, can I help you? She turned out to be the administrative person. And I said, I hope so. I'm looking for a job. And she said, well, you're in luck. The owner's just walking down the hall. And I looked and this stoic man walked over to me and he said, what's your business? And I said, I'm looking for a job. And he said, what are your credentials? And so I told him and he looked at me and then he said, come on in. And you know what? A month later, I was the director of research and development for that company. And we helped so many people. So that was the start. I saw a change. I saw a change in myself. I wanted answers for my digestive issues. But I saw this massive change in my dear friend's husband, and I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to help people that way. And it turned out that was the integrative approach I was looking for.
You said two wonderful things there. The first being that you were told no, but you didn't take that no and say, okay, well, this is my reality. You said, I'm going to choose my reality.
Right.
And you tried again and you tried again and you finally got through. And then the aspect of seeing that health can be more than just, well, one doctor says, okay, I'm doomed. Well, let me get a second opinion, right? And sometimes that's what we need. We need someone to believe in us, someone to really care. And it's sad, especially here in the West. Doctors are so quick to give a medicine, a prescription, say, okay, well, if you're feeling some pain, take this 2 times a day. And what that does is it numbs the pain, but it doesn't necessarily fix the pain. People are very quick to do surgeries rather than, okay, well, let's figure out what's really going on in your lifestyle and start to make some adjustments. We look at the surface level of things, and I can tell just from your drive and your determination to get that job in that company that you want it more than just a superficial level of something in life. Why do you think people, they will take the superficial more than if they would really dig down deep, find a true reason for life, for health, for going after more in their life, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And I think it's at least twofold, maybe even more. One is maybe some fear, maybe, okay, well, that's my fate. Okay, I'll just do it. Instead of really digging in and getting deeper, I think there's an element of fear there. And it's a healthy fear, things that we don't know. What's unhealthy about it is kicking down that door and figuring out, doing it with courage, as the saying goes. We all are scared to do things, but you still do it. That's the definition of courage. It doesn't mean that you're never afraid of anything. It just means you do it even though you're afraid. So I think that's one thing. I think sometimes fear holds us back. But secondly, I think a lot of times we don't know we can question things, especially when it comes to medicine. Even our generation, we think that, we weren't necessarily told we can question things, that the medical authorities, and they are amazing. I am not saying that it isn't. And there are pharmaceuticals that have been lifesavers. There's no question. Just like you were saying, it doesn't help with everything, but it does help with a lot of things. And maybe short term, whatever that may be. But I think we have to have that healthy question, that healthy curiosity about taking control of our own health. Our doctors are there to stand beside us, to walk with us. They're not there to take us and lead us forward. We're there to ask the questions. If something doesn't sit right, it's okay to get a second or third opinion or go to a different kind of health care provider. Maybe you want to go to a DO or a naturopath and also have a traditional MD as part of your care team. It doesn't have to just be one person, one visit, and that's it. I mean, you dig in and you ask questions. Why do I still feel tired? I'm on this medication that I'm supposed to be feeling better. Why do I have this brain fog? Why can't I think straight anymore? All of these things, and you will get doors closed so often, just like life. It's how it goes. But you keep on knocking, you keep on opening windows, you open whatever you can to get a little more light shined in on what's going on. So I think we have to learn that question things, ask questions. And if there is a provider, a healthcare provider that doesn't have the answers, that's okay. But find somebody who does, because they're out there and they're ready to help.
And you're right. We have to take action before we feel the courage, because courage comes after. You might think that, oh, I have to be courageous before I take action, but it's actually reversed. We have to take the action so then we can feel courageous. Think about just going on stage, for example, if you have a fear of public speaking. The more you do it, the better you get at it. Before you know it, you're just going to do it like it's a walk in the park. I remember when I was starting my teaching career and I had to go in front of the class or in front of the whole school. It was a little bit nerve-wracking, but after a little while, it's just a regular day. And we have to make sure we don't just allow that regular day aspect to take over the most important parts of our life. For example, if you're raising kids, right? Don't just allow that to be another regular day. Spending time with your loved ones, family members. Don't allow that to be a regular day. But there's going to be certain things that we can be more courageous in, just like that public speaking, or asking the right questions, or finding the person that is going to be able to give us the answers that we're looking for. I encourage everyone, especially if they're given some advice or some medical treatment that they're not really fond of. I'm going to give you an example. There's a story of a guy, he had a great mindset. He was a speaker and he would talk about motivation all the time. And everyone loves him, right? He had a wonderful mindset. One day he gets into a car accident. He's paralyzed from the waist down. The doctor comes in and the doctor says that he will never be able to walk again. And this is a guy who has a great mindset, talks about motivation, helps people live a better life, reach a better life. But now he's in the hospital bed after this news from the doctor that he will never be able to walk again. And so now he's distraught, right? Depression kicks in. Some time goes on. His father comes to visit him. And his father says, I don't even recognize this man in front of me. You're not my son. My son is more positive. He's more optimistic. And if he was given advice from a doctor saying that he wouldn't be able to walk again, he would find a way to walk again because that's the type of mindset he had. So the father basically struck that match, I guess you could say, or like lit that flame inside of him to say, you're right, Dad. So he started that journey. He said, I'm going to be able to walk again. And he did. Long story short, he was able to do it because of the power of the mindset. And sometimes the doctor can say, you're not going to be able to walk again. And we look at their status as a medical doctor and we say, you're right, doctor, right? Because he's someone who is, well studied, maybe even renowned, but it doesn't mean that he's looking at your life, looking at what's possible. And I love the idea of finding the possibilities. And we all have a success story. I remember when I was a swim coach, I had two boys who were afraid of swimming. And the mom comes in and she says, Michael, I don't care what you do to these boys, but I want them to swim. And I said, I can do anything, Mom? And she goes, I don't care what you do as long as these boys swim. And I said, I got you, Mom, don't worry. Long story short, the boys are going to be able to swim. But she went to this swim school and that swim school. The same thing if we just put it in the realm of, I went to this doctor and to that doctor, finally found the person who saw the potential in the person, who saw the issues in the person and started to fix them. What is your greatest success story with a client or with someone that you were helping heal, understand their health better, and then, of course, treatment?
Wow, great question. Right now, the one that comes to mind was another provider. So he's a nurse as well as a chiropractor. And his son, this is, again, another mental illness, and sometimes that term gets overused, but somebody who was hallucinating, hearing voices, really bad way. And the dad, the nurse, the DC chiropractor, had done everything. He had gone to so many traditional doctors. And again, no offense to these traditional doctors, but they were putting him on these antipsychotics and antidepressant medications, and a lot of them were interacting, so it just wasn't a very good scene. And he came upon our testing, our supplements, and was asking some questions. And as the director, I was front facing with our customers. So I would get on the phone, I would speak to them, I would walk through the labs, whatever it took. And one day he had called and he said, so I've got this patient for you. I'm really trying to understand what's going on. These are the labs. These are his neurotransmitters, all of this stuff. What can you make of it? And I said, well, there's a lot of, discrepancies here. There's a lot of neurotransmitters that need to be much, much more supported, all of this stuff. And I said, this patient is in a pretty bad way, isn't it? And he said, yeah. And he said, he's my son. And I thought, oh boy, this is going to be even harder to get through, because now we've got a provider, a clinician who knows all of this, integrative medicine stuff, but he's also a dad. And that makes it even more, you don't have that 1 degree of separation anymore. And so we worked and months went by. Oftentimes these things do not remedy in a session. They don't, and you know this just with mindset stuff as well. It does not remedy in a session many times. So it took months, and finally a year had went by, and we had got that boy to a point where he was on one medication. He still had to be on that to remain in a place where he felt comfortable. But he ended up being accepted into college. He got a college degree. He also started his own business. And to this day, not a voice, not a hallucination, nothing. And so that's one of the greatest successes, I would say, because it was multi-layered and it was a dad in the form of a clinician as well. And so there were a lot of layers that we had to get through just with the dad in order to make sure that his son was taken care of. And then just recently, I started working with a lady who has an autoimmune disorder and a lot of skin issues and different things. And I don't think it's anything to do with me. I just, gave some advice and different things, but she listened. And that's the thing. She listened and she was a willing participant in getting her health back on track. The skin manifestations, the rashes, the whatever's gone. And so, and again, it's a process. It takes time. But as a willing participant, as somebody who says, look, I'm going to try this. I'm going to talk to other providers. I'm going to bring in all of these, healings that can, that will work with my particular patient or my son or whatever. They're willing to take that journey with me. That's when I know I'm going to make a difference. And so those are just sort of two smaller successes. The one with the mental illness, boy, I just am so proud of him for getting his college degree. He's just a wonderful young man. You see that they have to be willing participants and they have to ask those good questions. And so those I would say would be two of my oldest and most recent successes.
I was just recently reading a book. It's from Napoleon Hill. I forget which book it is. He has many books. I think it was about success or something like that, or about the mind. One of the chapters was talking about there was a woman who said that she had cancer in her left breast, and she didn't have cancer in her left breast, but she kept telling herself she had cancer in her left breast, and eventually she did have cancer in her left breast. So the power of thought. There's another example in the story of a person who thought they had a tumor. And so when they would do the x-rays and check her out, she had a tumor. But when they went to operate on her, there was no tumor there because she was no longer conscious of it. It just disappeared. So the mind is so powerful. And I think we forget just how powerful the mind is. So when you had that father and that son, they came in, they trusted you. They put their belief in you. And they probably had to have some level of belief that they can get better, that they can fix this. Because if they didn't have it, then it wouldn't happen. How do you build that trust in client-doctor relationship? Because how I do it might be a little bit different. I typically just start very slow and we build up. What is your process?
It's the same. I would say it's a slow process. Like you said with the mind, it's the same thing with overall health as well. And especially if you've got a file that thick, you've been to hundreds of doctors or you've been to, over the years, right? A lot of things build up. And then the last thing, they come to you, they still got one more in them. They come to you basically saying, look, I've tried everything. So here I am. What are you going to do? Well, you have got to handle that very, very tenderly. But at the same time, and you know this as well, you still have to hold folks accountable. And so for how I do it is I start to open it up, make a safe space so that they know that they can share as they feel necessary, their medical, history with me, their struggles. And it can take 2, 3, 4 sessions sometimes with them before they really relax into the fact that I'm not going anywhere, that I genuinely want to hear what's going on. And I genuinely want to put the pieces together. I was working with a clinician. She's a psychologist. And she said, you know what, Kelly, my job is not to keep clients forever. She said, I want to help them get well and get on with life. And if they have to come back, I'll welcome them with open arms. And I thought to myself, that's something that builds that trust too. It's not a money thing. It's not I want to keep you for forever. It's, look, I'm here to walk with you to get you well. And then if you come back for maintenance or if something else happens where you want to come back and get more help, I'm here. So it does take time. You're absolutely right. And it's providing that safe place where they feel they can be vulnerable with you. It's like any other relationship. You have to build that area of vulnerability up so you both can participate. Because I do too. I'll share some of my, struggles. It's not the focus, but I'm human too. And so I like to build that. But you're absolutely right. It takes time. It does. You want them to be comfortable with you.
I typically keep clients for around 3 months, sometimes a little bit longer depending on their situation, but typically in 90 days is all I need to in order to change your mindset. Because what I do in that 90 days is I plant the seeds, I plant a whole field. And it
Yes.
might take some time to sprout. It might take some time for them to finally realize, like, oh, wait, this is it, right? Because we handle most of the issues. I make it very aware to them what their issues are. If they're having any self issues, for example, a lot of people have fear, as we talked about earlier. They might make excuses. That's one of my clients' favorites. They always will say, oh, I don't have time, right? That's an excuse. Oh, I wasn't able to do this because of a car accident or things like that. I was like, okay, well, things are going to happen in life, right? We have to deal with them, especially as adults. We have to make sure that just because something bad happens to us, we don't allow that circumstance to change and to control our whole life. We have to take back control. And one of the things you do is you help people take control of their health. And that is so important, especially in a world where everything is so fast. Give me some fast food. Give me something quick that I can pop in the microwave. Because at this point, I'm just looking for substance. I just want to feel full. Doesn't matter how I get it. I need my coffee with my sugar. I need my sodas with my dinner. And I need my desserts after every single meal, because if I don't have it, I don't feel fulfilled or I don't feel happy. We give ourselves this idea that we need all this extra stuff in our life to maybe have good health, but we don't do the healthy things like working out, watching our diet and nutrition. And it's not until something is broken where they say, well, I think I need to go see a doctor. I have high blood pressure. Or my heart's going a little bit too fast. Or now I have diabetes. I mean, it could be a whole range of health problems, but they got themselves there, right? Sometimes it can be genetics, but oftentimes it's going to be self-inflicted, right? They are giving that disease to themselves. As I said earlier, the woman who said she had cancer in her left breast, she gave that to herself. And if we don't have good habits, good lifestyle, then we're going to give us the same type of aspect in our health, right? We're not going to be fit. We're going to have heart problems. We're going to have high blood pressure. I mean, you name it, we go down that list. What would you say to someone who might be going down the path of not taking care of their body, not taking care of their life, but to get back on track and to focus on their health to being the number one priority that they should be looking at?
That's so well said. I think a couple things. Because I do a lot of keynote speaking, I've learned really quickly how to read my audience. And I do that with my clients and patients as well. Some folks need more softness because all they've heard is you must, you must, you must. And they've never heard, it's okay. It's okay to fall once in a while. You just got to get back up again, And then there are other people that have to be held accountable. I've heard so many times, I've got to lose these 10 pounds. I'm so fat. And I have stopped them and I've said, look, we are changing the way you speak about yourself. I've had enough. I've had enough. And it's the same thing with this, what you talk about with mindset. Absolutely the same thing. You start saying that you're fat, you're fat, you're fat. I'm unhealthy. I'm unhealthy. I'll never get fit. I'll never get fit. And you won't, because you'll be stuck in that rut. Instead of being on the path, you'll be in the ditch. A really good friend of mine wrote a book about that, and she's a psychologist as well. There's 2 miles of ditch for every mile of a path. You decide where you're going to be. It's very easy to fall off and start bumbling around in the ditch, but getting back on the road on that path is the ultimate, and that's what you want. And so there are times for people, I'll work on how they even speak about themselves. We won't even talk about going out for a walk or how to change their diet or, how to get better sleep at night. We won't even go that far. I want to change the way they speak about themselves, because you're absolutely right, Michael, when you say, you get into that path, well, then that's what you become. And it's not frou-frou. There's another clinician, her name is Dr. Carolyn Leaf, like the tree, on the trees. She's amazing for mindset coaching as well. And she speaks very much about that. All her research is in what we say about ourselves, or a good portion of her research. And it doesn't mean, I'm the Queen of England, or I'm this, or I'm that, but it's, I'm, wonderfully and fearfully made, or I'm going to succeed at this, or I'm working hard and I'm going to achieve this. Things that that this is within your realm, that's how you have to start speaking about yourself. I will get fit. I'm walking toward the path of getting fit, whatever your mantra may be. But it certainly isn't what you are right now that you want to change. So I'm fat, I'm this, I'm that. And the reason that's coming to me is because I've recently been working with that, trying to, not myself, but working with partners in trying to get them to speak better to themselves, get them walking in the path that they want to be down the road. And so definitely I've done it a couple ways. Like I said, I've read my audience. Sometimes I'm softer, sometimes I'm harder. And I keep people accountable no matter how I approach them to what they say they're going to do and who they are, who they're becoming, because I don't want them back in the ditch. I want them back on that path. So it can be tough sometimes, but you have to read your person. You have to make sure that you give them what it is, not that they necessarily want, but what they need. And that can be a very different thing. I don't want them, laying in the ditch where they've made it comfortable with a blanket. I want them back on that path, where they can be their best selves. And that's what I focus on.
I typically have a more forward approach, but there, of course, there's going to be some people who need that softer approach. So you have to understand when you have to switch for that individual, because sometimes the person just needs needs to, let go of all that they're holding on to. And
Right.
you just have to be that space for them. But then there's some times where you have to hold that person accountable, because we are all capable of achieving great things in our life. It's just that we stop ourselves. One of the greatest quotes I ever heard was, all the obstacles that we give ourselves, we did it ourselves, and it's in our mind. So we have to make sure that we're not just giving ourselves obstacles, or we're not giving ourselves excuses. Well, I'm in the ditch, but I have a blanket, I got food, water, I have all my basic needs met. But are you happy? Are you fulfilled? Can you be better? The answer is always yes. You can always make some advancements, even if it's fractional, even if it's a small, tiny victory, a step in the right direction. And I think people right now, they look at themselves in the mirror and they see themselves as all the work they have to do, right? They don't look at how far they have come. They look at how far they have to go. So maybe there's someone who has to lose 10 pounds, but then there's someone who has to lose 50 pounds. And they're going to look at that person who has to lose 10 pounds and they're like, well, you don't know my hardship. I have to lose 50 pounds. You only have to lose 10. You're lucky. I can't lose 50 pounds. I think I can lose 10, but I can't lose 50. So we give ourselves different circumstances depending on how we perceive ourselves. And when I help people with weight loss and fitness and things like that, we don't look at it as, okay, we need to lose 75 pounds. We just say, well, let's see what we can lose this month, right? So we can probably lose safely 1 pound to 2 pounds a week. And that's going to be good, right? That's where we are. Now, if we lose 3 pounds that month, did we fail? No, we didn't, right? We lost 3 pounds. We look at that small victory. We look at what we have accomplished, and then we just keep moving. Maybe the next month we lose 4. Build that confidence. And it's so important that we do that in the beginning stages, because they see that growth. They see that something is changing in their life. Maybe they feel a little bit more energetic. Maybe they feel a little bit more happy. Maybe they realize that their pants are now getting a little bit too big and they're like, I have to go buy a new wardrobe. And that is a good feeling. But that good feeling doesn't happen when we just look in the mirror and we just say, oh, I'm going to have a pity party today. I'm going to talk about myself and I'm going to say all the things that are wrong with me. Well, what's right with you? What can't be right with you? We look at that aspect too, because that can be a life changer. And many people, they just have to switch how they conversate with themselves. And it's very important. And as you were talking about, like with your partners, or going along down that line a little bit, you're just allowing them to approach it in a different direction rather than just saying, you need to speak like this, okay? Because what you're doing is wrong. Where you're giving them the opportunity to be themselves and to learn about themselves. Again, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And it's the same idea when you're trying to change a person. A person is not going to change because all of a sudden someone told them to change. They're going to change when they're ready or when they see that it's possible. And I think what you said is spot on, right? You create that possibility for them.
Mm-hmm. You are so right. Everything you just said, that is absolutely the case with everybody. The approaches are different, but you're absolutely right. Everyone is capable of those small victories. No question in my mind. And I remember doing my PhD, and it's a 4-year program. And I remember being I'm going to say about 6 months into it, and it was overwhelming. You had all the classes, you had all of the experiments you had to do. Everything was coming at you. And finally, I had to say to myself, all right, what can I do today? What can I do this week? What's due this month? And I looked at it incrementally like that, because you are absolutely right. When you look at it like a big picture, those 50 pounds, 75 pounds, whatever, that you have to get rid of for your own health's sake and for your family, but for you first, you're absolutely right. You will look at that like climbing Everest. But if you look at it, all right, well, let's get up 500 feet or 1,000 feet up that mountain. I can do that, and you figure out a plan to get there. All right, well, what's the next 500 feet or what's the next 1,000? And looking at things, not just health, but to your point, it's everything. You look at things in life and let's face it, there's a lot of overwhelming things. You turn on the news and you're overwhelmed in less than 20 seconds. So what if you looked at it in incremental steps, from the tiniest, the small victories like you're talking about, all the way to what you can accomplish this week, let's say, and then you start to build on that. You're right in what you're saying. You have those small victories. All of a sudden now you've got a little more courage. You got a little more drive to head up that mountain, and it's the human psyche. We're all under that same umbrella. It's a little bit of tweaking, a little different for each of us to really respond. So I like what you said. That was really good.
And it's important too, when we think about the aspect of a doctor, a mentor, a coach, someone who's going to be there to help us to facilitate our growth and our betterment, because someone like you is going to be able to see blind spots that the person might not see. And it's important that we understand that too, because I might be a doctor and I might say, well, I know all about health and fitness and I'm doing all this stuff for my body, but I still have all these issues. But then if I go see you, then it's kind of like, oh, this is the issue. It's kind of like something that they didn't even realize or think of, right? Maybe it's because their wife's such a good cook and they're eating all this bad quality food, but it tastes very good. So they don't see it as bad. They see it as delicious. They're like, this is delicious. My wife's the best cook ever. But at the same time, are you going to the gym? Are you exercising? Things like that. And especially for men, like our body changes very quickly. So we might have been eating a lot of carbs when we're younger, maybe even in our early 20s. But then all of a sudden, when we're in our late 20s, early 30s, our body changes. So we need to understand that body. And if we don't make adjustments, keep doing the same thing, it's kind of like, well, I always did it this way. Why is it not working anymore? Our body changes. And I know that when you're working with different people, you not only see what's going on, but you also see where they are too. And I think that is so important too, right? Looking at an individual of where they are rather than, oh, okay, this is just a blanket fix, right? And the blanket fixes are going to be one of the most dangerous things that we can do. Oh, you have a problem just like everyone else. But the individual person, right? That is essential, because if we just look at it as, oh, I have clients who had this issue and this is to fix. But instead of looking at the person, and you said something earlier on that I want to touch on, they would come in with a huge file of paperwork from all these doctors. You can read it, oh, they got all these problems. You have two choices. You can understand what was in those files and just say, okay, well, I'm going to go off the word. Or you can put the file to the side and then you can begin your own diagnosis. That is so important, because if you just say, oh, well, going back to teaching, because I was a teacher, oh, I got this IEP from this behavioral challenged kid. Thank you for that IEP. Let's figure out what's really going on. And I started working with the kid, and the kid is the sweetest kid in the world. And I'm thinking, well, whoever wrote that IEP either doesn't know how to manage people, or they just are very upset as a person, because they're not really looking at the individual, right? We have to look at the individual. And right now, I think a lot of people, they give themselves just an idea of a person. All right, you're a man, you need this. You're a woman, you need this. You're in your 40s, you need this. Versus, where are you today? Right? And then understanding that aspect and then helping them heal because of that aspect.
You're absolutely right in what you just said. There's so many intricacies, so many differences between, let's say your practices, you really focus on women. Well, between 5 women, you're going to have so many different applications for the same symptom, what they're coming with you at with the same symptoms. You're potentially going to treat very differently or suggest, or the origins of why they're coming to you with those symptoms are going to potentially be very different. So I love what you said about when you mentioned about the file, when I was talking about that, and you have really a couple choices. You can read it, and I always do that. I'll read through, but I'm reading through exactly like what you said, with a discerning eye, in that I don't want what's said in those files to be that person. I want to know about that person myself. Very much precision medicine, very much individualized medicine, as they say. That file, thank you very much. It gives me a little bit of information to go on, some labs maybe that I can review with my client, but it's not going to direct me in any stretch of the imagination, except to maybe ask questions. Maybe I hadn't thought about that. There's a lab for that. Okay, I'm going to ask about their allergy testing, or I'm going to ask about this, whereas I might not have gotten to that right away. So I use it as a guide. And same thing with what you're saying. Those assessments of those kids, yeah, you can use it as a bit of a guide, maybe, but then at the same time, now it's your interaction with that particular little one. And what is your assessment? So it becomes very much an individualized relationship that you're building, kind of like what we were talking about before. How do you establish those relationships? Well, it's the same thing. Even when you have all of that data coming at you, that person is still individual, still unique to you in that moment in time. And I think it's really important that we focus on that. And you hear this often. I'm sure you've heard it many times, precision medicine or individualized medicine. And people think, well, what in the world is that? It's exactly with what you just said. Just because everybody, comes to you with all of these symptoms that are in the same bucket does not mean they'll respond to treatment or changes in lifestyle, changes in mindset, the same. And so we have to be very mindful of that, speaking of the mind, to make sure that we can apply those various suggestions to the very specific person that's in front of us.
Yeah, I am not a fan of cookie cutter approaches. So, for example, I know a lot of coaches, they do programs, online programs. So, this 9-week program, you're going to be exactly where you are. And I just think in my head, I'm like, how in the world are they going to be where they are? It's like you don't even know where they are.
Right.
One of the most important things I do and I help people understand is that we figure out where you are and we figure out where you want to be, and then we facilitate how to get there the best possible way.
Right.
That's the best way to mindset, and the best way to growth, and the best way for you to see achievement. Because if you just say, well, if I read this book, it's going to make me successful, not true, right? Because a book that changed my life might not be a book that will ever change your life, because your knowledge set is different. You have been building up slowly knowledge, and it finally is the tipping point, right? So sometimes we can have a lot of trauma in our life and something sets us off, right? Let's say you're in a relationship, right? And let's say your partner is just leaving clothes all around the house, right? You're like, pick up your clothes, pick up your clothes, pick up your clothes, right? And then they're like, okay, right? Then there's one day where they forgot to close the fridge and you just lose it. You're just like, all right, I'm very upset, right? It was the tipping point. It's not that they left the fridge open. It's just that everything else was the building point. So when you read one book and you read 2 books and you read a bunch of books, there's going to be a book that's a tipping point that says, I finally got it. And this conversation that you and I had today is the building blocks to health, is to betterment, because they get to understand little by little, just from conversation, that, okay, now I learned something about myself. I was one of those people that looked in the mirror and I saw how much I have left versus how far I've come, or I see all the work that I have to do. And then I say, that's a lot of energy. I don't want to do all that work. So there can be something that you take away from this, right? So we look at the little nuggets that we give you in every single episode here in Coaching a Session, because we don't have a script when we talk. It's all off the cuff. We're just having a regular conversation, and it's a mindset conversation because we see the potential in people. And I know the people that you work with, you see the potential in them. So if they come to you with an ailment, you see that they can get better. And I think that's so important for a medical doctor or for a health professional, because you can see that they can get better rather than, oh, well, it's the big C, there's nothing we can do, right? You can take some chemo, things like that, the blanket stuff, right? let's try something else, right? Let's figure out what we can do. And that can lead to some of the most amazing turnouts in a person's life.
And I love how you package that because, and I can well appreciate that that's what you do with your clients as well. And you mentioned it. You show them that they can do this. You believe in them, knowing that they can, make this change and strive for this or achieve that. And it's the same thing on the health side of things as well, because the brain and health, they can't be separated. People oftentimes will look at health like, well, that's your immune system. And that's separate from how you think. And that's separate then from how you digest your food. It is all one and the same. So how you packaged it, that makes perfect sense in understanding how a person can optimally, function, live optimally. I think one of the nuggets that I definitely want to make sure that your listeners know, or maybe hold on to, is to be curious, is to ask questions. If somebody says no, or if somebody says, I don't know, or you kind of get an answer like that kind of puts you back on your heels, ask somebody else. There's always going to be somebody that you can find out information from. So I always say, stay curious about things. Ask as many questions as you want, as you feel comfortable with, and find people that will be able to provide those answers. My dad, I remember when I was in university, he sent me a picture. It's a picture of a herring, like a blue herring, and it's got a frog in its mouth. So all you see are the frog's legs coming out of this blue. It's a cartoon, but the frog, one of his arms is around the herring's throat, and it says, never give up. So that frog is about to be dinner, but he's like, nope, I'm not going down there. Never give up on this. And I know you can get tired and frustrated and scared and all the rest of it, but coupled with never giving up and always asking questions until you can get to a place where you're feeling healthy, that could be, to me, those are the two nuggets that I want to leave with you and your listeners, is just never give up and always ask questions. There are answers. We just got to find them.
We did hint at it early on. Ask questions, right? Be curious. And it might have been one of those things that people just kind of overlooked. But the fact that you made it very aware to people, now they're going to look back, or maybe even go back to the beginning of the episode, listen to it and says, oh yeah, she did say that, right? Because it's such an important aspect to our growth, right? Ask questions, to be daring, to not simply just accept what happens or what someone says, because someone can say something very negative. And just because it's negative for them doesn't mean it has to be negative for you. You get to decide what is your life. So if you're not happy with something, if you want to make some changes, if you want to get into a healthy lifestyle, then you can make that choice. That's your choice. It's not for someone else to make, whether they be a parent, a spouse, sibling, or even a doctor. You get to choose that. Before we leave, Kelly, can you please share with us any last words, and then please tell the audience where they can find you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love what you just said as well about you get to choose. You've probably heard this 1,000 ways from Sunday, but this is not a dress rehearsal. We get one go round. And again, it's our life. We're told that for a reason. It belongs to us. And if somebody tells you no and you needed a yes, then you go somewhere else and you find that yes. You work at it. And like I said, never give up. So I love that. But the last sort of parting words is thank you, Michael, for this and what you're doing. I absolutely love this platform. I love the fact that you are reaching people with it's just different. It's a different way of looking at life. And like I said, we got one of them. That's it. So let's make the best of it, right? Your listeners can find me on, I have a website, drkellyolson.com, OLSON.com. You can find me on Twitter and Pinterest and all things Dr. Kelly Olson. And I have an Instagram page too that I absolutely love, 2 of them. I've got my Dr. Kelly Olson page, and it's brain gut related. So it's really looking at sort of how that functions in your body, how stress can affect digestion, how sleep can affect things. So it's all very much that. And then at Why Gray Matters, it's things like, why do I get a headache when I drink red wine? Or what's a colonoscopy? Or what's a colonic? So there's all kind of really interesting kind of medical things that maybe you didn't think to ask. So I have those two different Instagram pages, and would love, love, love to interact with your listeners. So thank you for that.
Perfect. And I will put all of your links in the description box below so people can easily find you. I encourage everyone to check her out, especially follow her Instagram pages so they can learn about better health, better nutrition, and a better understanding of the mind. Because as you said, life is not a dress rehearsal. We only get one of them. So we have to make the best out of every single day that we have. If something is going wrong in your life, don't wait until it's broken. Take action today to learn how to fix it. I want to thank my guest, Dr. Kelly Olson, for coming on coaching this session. A great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
I would like to thank my guest, Dr. Kelly Olson, for coming on coaching this session. As you can see, she's someone who is looking at how can she help? How can she make adjustments in your life? And regardless of what has happened in your past, guess what? She is not going to be looking at, well, oh, you took this medicine, you did this, you tried this. She's going to look at you. And that's the most important thing you can ever have in a doctor. Because if you're going to have just your regular doctor that's just a cookie cutter or so quick to send you off to another doctor, and before you know it, you went to 50 doctors and all 50 doctors do not know how to help you. Well, you need to make sure that you can find someone who's going to give you some sound advice and who's going to be able to set you in the right direction. Perhaps you had a back pain, or if you were having some mental type of ailments, you can start to make some changes in your life. Just because someone said, oh, you're always going to be like this, or your circumstance is this, it doesn't mean that is your circumstance. You get to choose what your circumstance is. And the mind is so powerful, because just because someone has said something, it can make us believe them, especially if they're in a place of power. For example, doctors are typically more renowned because of all of their education, their background, and just how they're portrayed in society. If you say you're a doctor, they go, oh, wow, you're a doctor? Yes, you're a doctor, right? But it doesn't mean you're a good doctor. So how can we find good doctors? How can we find people who are going to support us? How are we going to find the cure rather than the Band-Aid? And I believe Dr. Kelly Olson has what many people are going to be looking for, and that's going to be an opportunity to return back to their health, an opportunity to heal, an opportunity to regain their life, to step back into their power per se. Because any doctor can write a prescription, but not every doctor is going to look at you intentionally and see what you're capable of, and to see what's truly broken so they can begin the fixing process, so they can begin the healing process. Because the goal is not just to put you together until you break apart again. The goal is to keep you together so you don't have to go see the doctors again, or see the doctors every single week or every single month. Of course, you're going to have your yearly checkup, but that's just going to be a check mark off the list for the year, because you're going to go to the doctor and you're going to find that you're in good health because you're doing everything that you're supposed to do. And oftentimes, if you have someone that is caring about you, someone who's really adamant about your health, your fitness, your mental well-being, your future, you're going to see that you're going to be more proactive in making sure that every single day you do what is necessary to make sure that you're in the best health possible. And if you're not in the best health possible, then take the steps today to make sure that you can get into the best health possible. So check out all of her links, all of her websites, and you can begin that process today. My name is Michael Rearden. I'm a mindset coach. If you have any questions, you can email me coachinginsession@gmail.com, and I will see everyone on the next episode of Coaching in Session. Until then, everyone, take care.